That picture right there says a lot, though. It's just such a flex.
Yeah. Oh yeah, dude.
I think this is the ultimate flex picture, and whenever everyone's been posting their Twitter posts remembering Bill Russell, this has been the main photo that everyone has used for him, and rightfully so. This deserves a place in a museum somewhere. Welcome in, Slumpbusters. It is a sad week for the NBA world as Hall of Famer, 11-time NBA champion, and all-time Boston Celtics legend Bill Russell passed away, age 88, I believe. So pretty long life for a big man. So you usually don't see guys that tall live to that age. So, long life, a life well lived. And honestly, Bill Russell, aside from being a Hall of Fame level basketball player, a Hall of Fame level human. So, we have a little video here today. So we're going to be reacting to making the case Bill Russell is the greatest of all time. So we see a lot of debate every day in the basketball world of who the greatest of all time is. Is it LeBron? Is it Jordan? Is it Kareem? When it comes to Bill Russell, so we're talking about a guy who has 11 rings. So 11 NBA championships. And whether you want to say he won it in the 60s when there's like 8 teams, so it doesn't really count as much. Regardless, it still is a high level of dominance, especially high level of dominance for the era. So I think that's one of the biggest things to take away from Bill Russell's legacy that he's leaving behind in the NBA. What did you think when you heard the Bill Russell news, Chris?
Dude, so many legends, so many people passed away, but Bill Russell was the biggest one, man. Especially
literally the biggest one.
Yeah, especially for all the Celtics fans out there. I'm sorry, Juju, but yeah, it's sad. It's sad to lose a legend like that.
Well, the way I think about the NBA, the way I think about these Hall of Famers is we've gotten lucky that so many of them have lived to be with us today, that even our generation actually got to grow up and see these guys. Well, not see these guys play, but see these guys in their 40s, 50s, 60s, etc., living a long life. So, that's something that you don't really see too with a lot of sports. You talk about baseball. Obviously, Babe Ruth was long gone by the time we were born. When you look at the NFL, we talk about guys like Gale Sayers or Bart Starr. These guys were well gone by the time we were really around. So, that's one of the unique things about the NBA, that it's still relatively a young game compared to its counterparts.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, guys. Well, let's check out the video. Let's get to it.
Basketball is special. The size of the court and the lack of pads or helmets give fans the most intimate experience.
You know what's funny about that first highlight there of Shaq diving into the crowd? I was at that game.
Really? When?
I was at that game. They were playing the Trailblazers. Got a free ticket to that game in high school to go watch that one. And big old 300-pound, big cactus, as they were calling them when he was with the Phoenix Suns, Shaq launched into the crowd. I feel bad for anyone that was in the first row on that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I still haven't been to an NBA game. Still,
I got to change that. We got to change that. You got to come up my way. We'll meet in the middle at San Antonio.
Experience of a team sport that exists. And because of the different styles that basketball allows for, players develop their own distinct identities.
Hold up. Before we get into it, who is your GOAT, Christian?
Well, as a Spurs fan, Tim Duncan.
Tim Duncan's your GOAT?
Yep, dude. Always loved him.
Controversial. I think for most people, he's a top 10 guy. Most people would say that Tim Duncan's in their top 10, probably a top 5, top 6 player. I think I'm going to still lean Michael Jordan as of today. Yeah, I go back and forth with Michael Jordan and LeBron.
That's very understandable.
Yeah, I think about LeBron's stats, and I think about 10 straight NBA finals. It's ridiculous. The problem is, I think in order for my mind to truly match Jordan, he had to win the same number of championships as Michael Jordan. But yeah, I guess we'll figure out see what this guy says. Maybe Bill Russell is the GOAT, and I was wrong this whole time.
Signature styles through their creativity, flair,
Oof.
and athleticism.
Look at that.
And although no player
Killed
succeeds
him on that
alone,
dunk.
the scoring volume and two-way nature of the sport give individual stars
that
a
James
nearly
Harden?
unprecedented
Yep, that
amount
was
of
Harden.
control over the
Yeah, see
flow
that
and outcome of a
beard
game.
flying
For
in the
this
wind?
reason, players are constantly compared to their peers and to the legends of the past in order to answer the most hotly contested question in the sport. Who's the greatest to ever do it? For many, the question is redundant. They believe in only one right answer, their answer. Others might have their own personal stance, but acknowledge one or two alternatives. But I believe that there's much more nuance to the question of greatness and more answers to it than you might think. By my count, there are 8 players in NBA history that have a substantial claim as the GOAT. It's a subjective thing though. I can't give you a definitive answer. All I can do is make the argument. So today, I'll be making the case for Bill Russell as the greatest basketball player of all time.
Do you think rings are the pinnacle thing to like associate with the greatest of all time player?
Rings, yeah. Stats, of course, matter a lot. But I feel like rings, because that's the one thing that everybody brings up is, okay, so what about this player? How many rings does he have? It's like it's like the example of Tony Romo, great quarterback, has the stats,
Good
never
quarterback.
won a Super Bowl.
Good
I
quarterback.
like, yeah, he's a good quarterback. He was a good quarterback.
Not a Hall of
But-
Famer. Hall of
Nah,
kind of
not Hall of
good,
Famer.
but yeah, his back gave out on him. See the Cowboys bias early on in this one.
Imagine what I'm trying to do. I'm speaking to the most data-driven, analytically obsessed, statistically fixated generation of basketball fans that has ever lived. And I'm not
Facts.
just speaking to you. I'm making the argument that the greatest player of all time is one who, rather than scoring in high volume or with top-notch efficiency, excelled at defense, an aspect of the game that went virtually unrecorded for this player's entire career, an aspect which, even today, the most advanced metrics still provide an incomplete picture of. More than that, though, this player excelled in the wrinkles of basketball, manipulating the fabric of the game into his own design. This player is remembered for his unparalleled ability to lead, to inspire, to foster cohesion and self-sacrifice in favor of loftier goals, to dance along the line that blurs team and brotherhood. These empirically irrelevant skills resulted in the most successful professional sports.
That picture right there says a lot, though.
Mm-hmm.
It's just such a flex.
Yeah. Oh yeah, dude.
I think this is the ultimate flex picture, and whenever everyone's been posting their Twitter posts remembering Bill Russell, this has been the main photo that everyone has used for him, and rightfully so. This deserves a place in a museum somewhere.
Oh yeah, it does definitely.
Look at all that hardware.
Dynasty in North American history. To begin making Russell's case, I want you to remember these legendary words from NFL head coach Herm Edwards. You play to win the game. It doesn't matter who you are, what your abilities are, what level you're playing at, what kind of sport you're playing, or who you're up against. You play to win the game. Remember that as we talk about Bill Russell. You play to win the game. Because when you look at sports and competition at its fundamental level, it is that simple. So, did he win? Hell yes, he won. In his 13 NBA seasons, Bill Russell captured 11 titles, more than any other professional team athlete of note. 8 of them came consecutively. I'll come right out and say it. If you want the GOAT conversation to be about winning, oh yeah, this guy had a great career, but this other guy just wanted to win more. This guy wanted to win more than anything. That's why he's better. I want winners. If that's the way we're gonna do this, then you have to crown Bill Russell. But was Russell an awe-inspiring athletic specimen? Nope. For that kind of player, you look to guys like Wilt and Shaq and LeBron. Was he a transcendent scorer? Like I said earlier, no. Players like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar were in another stratosphere in that department. Here's what Bill Russell was. He was a natural athlete at 6'10". He glided across the court.
But keep that number in mind, 6'10". So he was a center. He's a center, and he's less than 7 foot. And you compare that to today's game, where the average center is over 7 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that Bill Russell was able to dominate at less than 7 feet actually is more impressive Even when you calculate into his era, calculate like where he's coming from. And there's been some studies on it that the average height of the player in Bill Russell's era is actually about the same height as the average player in today's game. So that's another feather in his cap.
Dang.
The balance and grace of a 6'3" guard. Vertically, he was springy and had the uncanny ability to seemingly jump twice in the same instant. He was strong, but surprisingly lean and gangly, 220 pounds of all arms and legs. He had a level of anticipation and awareness that was second to none. Put it all together and you get the second highest rebounding average of any player ever. You also get the most domineering defender in basketball history. Historically, Russell was a basketball pioneer in an almost literal sense. In high school and college, he was told constantly that to be a great defender, you had to keep your feet on the floor at all times, so as to afford yourself the most maneuverability possible. Russell refuted these ideas, and instead leapt emphatically to meet defenders around the rim and block their shots into the arms of his teammates. Guys from back then described Russell as an almost nightmarish entity, someone who would lurk in plain sight and strike without warning. He would wage psychological warfare on his enemies through intimidation and exude an aura that demanded an equal amount of fear and respect. He could guard behemoths at his position like Wilt and Nate Thurmond, but he could also switch onto guards with an insignificant drop in proficiency. Moreover, at the NBA level, with Red Auerbach's help, Russell became the linchpin in the Boston Celtics' patented fast break offense. Russell would contest a shot, secure the rebound, and push the ball forward to his streaking teammates so as to attack a defense on its heels. I know that doesn't sound like much today. The fast break is a part of every offensive system in the NBA and has been for decades. But Russell deserves credit as being the anchor of the NBA's most prolific defense and for being the cornerstone of an innovative offensive system. Wait, Bill Russell was an innovative offensive player? But I thought he had sub-average offensive numbers. His shooting percentages weren't very good. He didn't average that many points. What are you getting at, Clayton? The truth, my good man. But seriously, free your mind from the idea that a great offensive player can only be the guy who puts the ball through the net.
I don't know. You could talk to Lakers fans and see how they felt about Russell Westbrook in that regard. Not a great shooter either. No, but that is one of Bill Russell's legitimate knocks. And people ask, like, what do you translated into today's game? I think I'm of the belief that any great player, you could put them in any era and they'll kind of figure it out more or less. They'll be able to adjust. And I think Bill Russell probably would have been able to adjust, even though, like I mentioned, he would be an undersized center in today's game. As far as the offensive output, it probably would have been more or less about the same. As a career, I think he's less than a 20 per game scorer. But when you look at the rebound numbers, they are just insane. Bill Russell definitely made up for it with his defense, like he's talking about being springy and athletic.
Passing ability were the keys to the engine of the Boston offense. You don't care though. His stats weren't good, and that's that. So let's talk about statistics. The important statistics in basketball are supposed to be points scored, rebounds, and assists. But nobody keeps statistics on other important things. The good fake you make that helps your teammates score. The bad pass you force the other team to make. The good long pass you make that sets up another pass, that sets up another pass that leads to a score. The way you recognize when one of your teammates has a hot hand that night and you give up your own shot so that he can take it. All of those things. Those were some of the things we excelled in that you won't find in the statistics. There was only one statistic that was important to us. Won and lost. Whoops, sorry. I slipped into first person there because I was reading a Bill Russell quote. As if my job wasn't hard enough, stats like steals and blocks, defensive stats, didn't start getting recorded until the mid-70s. The only stat I can give you is defensive win shares. Games that a team won that can be attributed in part or in full to a player's defensive contributions. No one has yet to come within even 80% of matching Bill Russell's 13-year career total in that category. And now we're back to winning.
So much for your GOAT.
Right, but hey, he's still in second.
Look at that. Look at that.
Still in second.
Like, yeah, a distant second.
Yeah, yeah, he got lapped pretty bad.
Even though, like, you look at Tim Duncan compared to Kareem at 3, that still is impressive jump in numbers. Even above Hakeem, Wilt, some of the other great, like, big guys. That's not, yeah, it's really impressive. A more modern player in Kevin Garnett as well. Yeah, Tim and Garnett really represented the era well. And gosh, Bill Russell still, I think though it is crazy to think that some of his most calculated stats or stats that he contributed the most weren't even calculated until the 70s, you know?
Yeah.
It's kind of like there's a lot of great NFL pass rushers that probably weren't on the all-time list because sacks weren't recorded until the tail end of their career by the time they already retired. So definitely how we keep track of stats has changed the game and how we talk about players a lot.
Yeah, it's like what he said at the beginning. Majority of fans know the stats. Like we're in the generation that it's all stats.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at Basketball Reference right now, and I can tell you note for note exactly what Bill Russell was. So, I mean, 44% field goal percentage, not great. You prefer that to be closer to 50. Total points per game, he averaged 15.1, which, again, when you think about an all-time player, is nothing fantastic. Rebounding totals, total rebounding. See, this is where he just really shines, though. 22.5 rebounds per game average.
That's good.
Yeah, really think about that in context. Like, the guy's just averaging over 20 rebounds per game.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Category. And now we're back to winning. The most important virtue of an athlete, right? It's how this debate always goes. 3 rings is more than 2. 5 rings is more than 3. 6 rings is more than 5. So why isn't 11 the largest number? I'll tell you why. There are 3 main reasons that people don't acknowledge the most decorated champion of all time as the greatest of all time. Went away. In the order I'll talk about them, they are that Wilt was better.
I mean, I get it.
Was weak, and that his team was stacked. First up, we have his friend.
You don't want anyone getting hurt
or
any players or coaches getting hurt by fans.
The careers of Wilt and Russell overlapped for about 10 years.
It's crazy.
And in those 10 years, the two became harbingers of the NBA as we know it. Their friendship, play styles, size, and championship.
You know, there is a great story, though, about Wilt and Russell, that Russell would let Wilt dominate him in regular season games to build up Wilt's ego. And then when the playoffs and finals came around, that's when Bill Russell would really step it up to like take Wilt out of games. So a little bit of mental warfare there to make your opponent think, oh yeah, I'm good. I'm the greatest of all time. Which honestly, if you look at some of Wilt Chamberlain's numbers, you would think he could make a case for greatest of all time. But no, I think that's like, think about that, like building up someone's confidence just to tear them down when the games matter most.
That's hardcore.
Yeah, that's a GOAT mentality right there. I think Kobe Bryant would be proud of that one.
Inverses of each other. They are immortalized together as 2 sides of the same coin. Because they played in a bygone era, many basketball fans take to all-time leaderboards and the pages of record books to gain a better understanding of these 2 men. Statistically, the comparison is a no contest. Wilt was and is a basketball anomaly. Wilt scored the most points in a game ever, had the most points in a season, remains the league's all-time rebounder, logged the most rebounds in a game, and so on. And not only did Wilt set all of these records, but he put the bar so far out of reach that...
Yeah, the NBA record book is basically the Wilt Chamberlain autobiography. I mean...
Yeah, that's crazy, dude.
We'll see colonies on Mars before we see all of his records surpassed. How do I even begin to suggest that Russell is the superior basketball player? Russell played in the same era, and so you'd think he would benefit from the same era advantages like Wilt did. But where Wilt averaged 30 points a game, Russell averaged just a paltry 15. Their field goal percentages are similarly lopsided. Only in rebounding do the two seem comparable, with staggering averages and untouchable career totals. There's really no argument, right? Well, the two played 143 total games against each other. That's almost 15% of all the games that Bill Russell ever played in. In the 94 regular season games they went head-to-head, Russell's team won 57 times. In the 49 playoff games that they saw each other, Russell's team won 29 times. But hey, those are team records. Even looking at the box scores of those games and playoff series show that Wilt got his no matter what. Surely there must be some way to award a player for his individual expertise. Something like the MVP award. the most valuable player, the player who adds the most to his team and gives them the best chance to win, regardless of the players that he plays with. That should be worth something, right? Especially considering that, until 1980, the MVP award was voted on by the league's players. If Russell's teams were so unfairly stacked, surely his peers would see this and understand that he was simply the beneficiary of a rigged system, right? And they'd give Wilt the award year in and year out because he was the best individual, right? Right. Look, Wilt won 4 MVP awards during his career. But it's not as many as Russell. Russell won the NBA's most prestigious award, signifying the most valuable individual talent in the NBA, 5 times. The rest of the NBA looked at the Boston Celtics,
Respect.
however talented they might have been, and recognized that it was Bill Russell who made them tick, and they had no problem voting him over Wilt. You want to know Russell's favorite award that he ever won in the NBA? His 1962 NBA MVP award. Why? Because that was the season Oscar Robertson averaged a triple-double. And it was the year that Wilt averaged 50 points a game. Russell averaged 18 points and 29.
Wilt Chamberlain averaged 50 points a game.
Dang, dude. Wow.
50 points a game.
I mean, it's like you said, that's why the records book is just his biography.
Yeah. It's honestly insane. Like, some of his numbers are straight up 2K numbers.
That's
Rebounds.
crazy.
Wilt's Warriors would take the Celtics to a Game 7 in that year's playoffs, only to lose in the game's dying seconds. Russell held the Wilt Chamberlain that had averaged 50 points that season to just 28 in the most important game of the season. And in the
Just 28.
finals, the Celtics would find themselves in another Game 7 against the Lakers, this time in an overtime period that would decide the champion. Sam Jones and Bill Russell combined for 9 points in overtime, giving Boston their 4th championship in a row. Russell would end the game with 30 points and 44 rebounds. And now, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. I wasn't alive to see Bill Russell or Wilt Chamberlain. There's a level of context I'll never have because I didn't live through that era. So why don't we hear from some of the people who did? Jerry West, Chamberlain's teammate from 1969 to 1973, said, "I don't want to rap Wilt because I believe only Russell was better, and I really respect what Wilt did. But I have to say, he wouldn't adjust to you. You had to adjust to him." 1975 Finals MVP and Hall of Famer Rick Barry said, "I'll say what most players feel, which is that Wilt is a loser. He is terrible in big games. When it comes down to the closing minutes of a tough game,
A little harsh.
Right? Will is a loser. Just ends it right there.
an important game, he doesn't want the ball. He doesn't want any part of the pressure. It is at these times that greatness is determined, and Wilt doesn't have it." Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in 1990 wrote this, an open letter to Wilt Chamberlain. "It's been several years now, Wilt, that you have been criticizing my career with your friends in the press. After any tough
Okay, but in his defense, Wilt was saying some nonsense type things that got them in trouble. Like, we got to watch it, but Wilt and Kareem had an all-time beef, one for the record books.
Oh, dang. I didn't know that.
Yeah, like they hate each other. They start off as friends,
in which you
but
didn't
then
do
grew to
well,
hate each
you
other.
blamed those around you and quit. People will remember that I worked with my teammates and helped us win. You will be remembered as a whining crybaby and a quitter, stats and all." Stories abound about Wilt's infatuation with statistics, from correcting scorekeepers to scolding teammates for not making baskets that would have counted towards his assist totals. In 1965, the Warriors felt that Wilt was toxic and decided to trade him. One of the prospective landing spots for the Big Dipper was none other than the Los Angeles Lakers, where Jerry West and Elgin Baylor desperately needed someone to throw at Russell. The Lakers management decided to poll the players on whether the team should trade for Chamberlain. The poll resulted in a 9-2 decision against bringing Wilt to the team. Is it fair to call Wilt a loser? No. But did he make his teammates better? Rarely. Wilt played in 9 Game 7s. Russell played in 10. Wilt lost 5 of his. Russell never did. Okay, but back then there were like 8 teams, nobody was very tall, there was just a bunch of scrawny non-athletes. Russell couldn't hold Joel Embiid's jockstrap today. If you abide by the "yeah, he was good for his time, but he couldn't hang today" mindset, I need you to be consistent. I need you to acknowledge that across the board. You've painted yourself into a corner that states that the greatest athlete will always be the newest one. that Aroldis Chapman is historically a greater baseball player than Babe Ruth. Because Chapman would smoke Babe Ruth like a dad playing wiffle ball with his son. That if someday the NBA implements a 4-point shot, you immediately have to look at Steph Curry and say, yeah, he was a good shooter for his time, but he couldn't cut it today. His era was easier. If he played today, he'd just be an average shooter. In that world, no one will ever hold the crown for long.
What do you think of his point there?
That's actually a really good point. I mean, you change the rules and the best player could be an average player. That it makes sense.
And I think when he mentions stuff like baseball, yeah, that's a great point in terms of the equipment changing over time. Obviously, you're talking about guys bringing big old 30-pound clubs to the plate as opposed to thinking about bat speed and wanting to have a lighter bat, throwing essentially a piece of leather around was the game of football versus throwing like a pristine custom made football like they do today,
Yeah, exactly. It makes sense. It's just our time now. Like, you know what I mean? Everything changes.
I will say though, to that point, I do think that the guys on the lower end of the NBA spectrum, so like the guys that come off the bench, might be better than the guys who came off the bench 30 years ago. I think the league's gotten deeper. I think it's gotten more athletic, mostly because we've gotten smarter about what we're scouting for and what we look for in players. And I think that that's one of the biggest changes in today's game. I would say, like, the elite level athletes from each era, I think would still be elite or at least very good in today's game. But it's the bottom end guys that probably would struggle the most.
Yeah, I think so too. Because like back then, you played for the championships. Like that's all that mattered. Nowadays, recruiting is a science. It's all algorithms to them. It's all numbers. It's everything to them.
Yeah, no, every front office has a sabermetrics department or analytics department to be able to evaluate players and break them down to mostly numbers, which we could say that that's cold and calculating, and it doesn't really do the sport justice because there is, of course, the intangible elements to players. But at the same time, when you can look at those numbers and read them correctly, you could sometimes figure out things that other people don't. I think the teams that succeed the most are very smart about what they do analytically, but also have the guys who bring in the culture. So they kind of have a mix of both. I think that you can't just be all in one basket. You can't just be in the purely culture basket, and you can't be in the only analytics basket. You kind of have to be able to merge the both to get the best product.
Yeah.
Because time will pass, and modern athletes inevitably age into ancient ones. So isn't the fairest way to evaluate these players to look at what they did in the context of their eras? I think so, because I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Everybody had era-specific advantages. Great players are great because they exploit them. Alright, let's try to get some context. I think that Russell's 11 championships actually hurt him historically in this way. It's such an incomprehensible number that it just lends itself to people trying to poke holes in it or find ways to discredit him. 11 is just too big of a number, right? Jordan has 6, and we know the stories of all 6. We can remember who LeBron and Kobe beat to win their championships and what it meant to them. It's hard to do that with 11, and it's even harder to do that when they happen.
All right, pop quiz. Can you name all the teams that Michael Jordan beat in the NBA Finals?
Crap.
All right, let me think about this one. I just watched The Last Dance not too long ago, so it's probably fresh in my mind. He beat Magic Johnson and the Lakers.
Okay, Lakers.
They beat the Trailblazers. They beat the Phoenix Suns when Charles Barkley was part of them.
I was thinking the Phoenix Suns as like my top answer, but I kept thinking, what if I get it wrong?
They beat the Seattle Supersonics, RIP, and they happened to beat the Utah Jazz twice, back-to-back years with Karl Malone on them.
Dang, it's crazy.
Yeah, so those are his 6 NBA championships. Kobe, I'd have to think about it. I know it's in my lifetime, but I have to think about it. I know, unfortunately, my Boston Celtics for sure. He beat them. Still thinking about that one. The Orlando Magic. And then, of course, the three-peat with Shaq, which they lost to the Detroit Pistons. Gosh, it's my youth. That's my childhood. I know I should be better about like knowing who Kobe won his chips against. But yeah, I'll have to think about that one.
In the ballpark of 60 years ago. I briefly touched on 62, so here's a little more context for you. After 8 straight titles for Boston, Wilt and the 1967 76ers put the league on notice. They won a league record 68 games and disrupted the Celtics' streak in just 5 games. They put the ribbon on their season weeks later when they won the championship. And then, the very next year, the 76ers entered the playoffs with the best record in the league. Wilt led the league in assists and won the MVP. When they met the Celtics in the Eastern Finals, they racked up a 3-1 lead. And then, as player-coach of the Celtics, Bill Russell engineered the greatest comeback basketball had ever seen, becoming the first team to ever overcome a 3-1 deficit. Wilt did not attempt a field goal in the second half of Game 7. Russell did damn near everything to ice the game in its final minute. 1966 was Red Auerbach's last year. He began the season by telling his contemporaries that this was their last shot to beat him. After defeating the Oscar Robertson Royals, and Wilt said,
Talk about a shot. This is your last chance, boys. Last chance to beat me. Good luck.
Right.
And he lights up a cigar.
76ers, the Lakers and the Celtics went the distance in the finals. In Game 7, an inspired Russell helped fend off an intense Lakers rally in the final period, tallying 25 points and 32 rebounds to send his coach out as a winner. Go look up his teams. You'll see that 1965 was Russell's best team. You might think it was easier back then, though, because Russell was playing against a bunch of nobodies. And you've got me there. He only had to go through Elgin Baylor, Wilt Chamberlain, Jerry West, Hal Greer, Dolph Schayes, Oscar Robertson, Willis Reed, Nate Thurmond, Walt Frazier, and Bob Pettit. You know, a bunch of nobodies. The fact is that the weak era argument is, more often than not, an excuse made by people who want to discredit a player from before their time.
That's just taking shots at the entire generation right there, right?
Yep.
I call it the big 3: Twitter, Reddit, and YouTube.
Oh, dude, don't get me started on Twitter, dude. God.
Yeah.
Twitter's so bad.
Elon Musk finish with Twitter. Whatever he's doing with Twitter, I don't even know at this point.
Twitter should just
Who can't be bothered to look them up and try to learn about them. Listen, I know it's crazy to think about how long basketball's been around. I know it's crazy trying to convince you that the first truly great player from the game's first truly great era was the greatest of them all. The odds that the first model was the best model are astronomical. It doesn't make it impossible, though. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that 8 teams actually made the league tougher, or that players from back then were just as good as they are today. And I don't have to. We're looking at this in context. The league was chock full of Hall of Famers and all-time greats, and the Celtics played in enough Game 7s that any rational observer would look at it and see that it wasn't easy for Russell. But wait, there's more. Because it wasn't just that Russell played in a weak era. He played with the better team every single year. If you didn't know, I've actually already made the case that Wilt was the greatest basketball player of all time. And I said this: Bill Russell consistently had better teammates than Wilt Chamberlain did. That's as good as a fact to me, and I will maintain it even when I make the case for Bill Russell. So here I am saying it. Bill Russell often had the best team in the NBA. And that makes sense, right? You don't win one championship without a great team, let alone 11. And Russell had a great team, a legendary coach, and talented teammates. Bob Cousy was the league's second MVP ever, and John Havlicek helped lead the Celtics to 2 more titles in the 70s. Plus, guys like Casey Jones, Bill Sharman, Frank Ramsey, Tommy Heinsohn, and Sam Jones are all in the Hall of Fame.
For anyone that was waiting for me to answer as far as the other 3 rings that Kobe had, it was against the 76ers, the Pacers, and the Nets. I knew the Nets won. I admittedly had to look up the 76ers and the Pacers. Forgive me. I was still a kid back then, you know. Been a long time since the year 2000.
Fame. But is it that simple? Like I said earlier, the players voted on MVPs during those days, and Russell won 5 of them. So, however stacked his team might have felt to the rest of the league, they still acknowledged that Russell made it all work. And look at those Hall of Famers that Russell played with and how many championships they won. There's no way the Hall of Fame could leave these guys out, right? So was it that Russell was actually playing alongside a 12-man roster of Monstars? Or were those guys Hall of Famers because they played alongside Bill Russell? I would argue that he had the better team all those years because those teams all had Bill Russell. He never cared about anything other than winning. He put himself and his teammates in position to win, time and time and time again. I know I keep repeating the number, but 11 championships. That's not a fluke. That's a team galvanized by a once-in-a-generation talent and a once-in-a-lifetime leader. There's no evidence that indicates that the Celtics would have enjoyed anything close to the amount of successes they did without Russell. The year before they got Russ, they were 39-33. The year after he retired, they were 34-48. Russell would throw up before big games throughout his career. It was a ritual that his teammates initially found unsettling, but eventually came to find a serene confidence in. Bill was setting an example. Their best player, despite all of the honors that he had won, and all of the champagne he had drank, still cared that much about winning. That's
okay, but what do you think of his tradition here?
It's pretty gross, but if you think about it, it really does show that that in his mind he's thinking, oh crap, like what if we lose? I'm gonna like he feels the pressure on him every time. If he didn't care, he wouldn't throw up. Like, you know what I mean? I
guess, but that can't be good for your stomach.
Oh no. Oh god, no. Nowadays that's considered an eating disorder.
Yeah, honestly, it's kind of borderline bulimia. Just think about how many wasted calories he has just because he kept hacking it up. Honestly, he's lucky he just didn't like tear his esophagus or do something crazy like that. Trying to, at least he didn't have to force it out, I guess. It appears that it came pretty natural. I get it. Happened. Hey, I've dealt with pressure in my life. I've been at the points where I want to throw up, so I can imagine before an NBA Finals game the type of pressure he was feeling. But yeah, I don't know. That's pretty gross tradition, but effective. Hey, again, I like to brag that the Celtics have 17 rings. Bill Russell's 11 of them. So hack away, big boy.
Maybe the most impressive thing to me. He never rested on his laurels, never used past accomplishments as justifications for anything. He withstood the test of time and the temptations of self-interest. He never stopped caring, and so his teammates didn't either. So when Sam Jones hits a game winner, or Tom Heinsohn explodes in a playoff game, don't take credit away from them, but know that they are the ones who will tell you that it was Russell who made it all possible. Please don't make me keep going. Fine. Bill Russell was cut from his high school JV team in his sophomore season. He was raw, lacked fundamentals, and was driven by unrefined passion alone. Then, as a junior and senior, he led the team to back-to-back state titles. Colleges didn't care though, and he didn't receive a single offer from any college. That is, until a scout from the University of San Francisco saw him and offered him a scholarship. In his 3 varsity years at USF, Russell helped turn a relatively unremarkable team into a perennial powerhouse. He went 71-8 and won 2 national championships. His junior year, the Dons started the season unranked. By the end of the season, they were the #1 team in the country and the national champions. In his senior year, the team went undefeated and carried the #1 ranking wire to wire. At one point, USF had a win streak of 55 games. Of the players on that team, only Casey Jones would go on to the NBA and, ironically, to play with Russell. Bill Russell is basketball Midas. Every team he touches turns to gold. And oh, by the way, Bill Russell's career coincided with the civil rights movement of the 1960s in a truly surreal way. He endured a disheartening amount of injustice during his career with a grace and pride that is worthy of remembrance in and of itself. But he did more than that, using his position to challenge the establishments around him and effect change. He was a leading voice at the Muhammad Ali Summit in Cleveland. He was at the March on Washington and in attendance for Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. He didn't attend his own Hall of Fame induction because he thought that someone like Chuck Cooper deserved to be the first African American inductee rather than himself. He was denied rooms in hotels and service in restaurants on basketball road trips, and so he refused to play. When Red Auerbach retired after the '66 season, Russell became the first black head coach in any of the 4 major American sports. While he was playing for the Celtics, vandals broke into his suburban home, spray-painted racist graffiti on the walls, broke his trophies, and defecated on his bed. His contributions to the civil rights movement are as important and notable as any other athlete. He helped light the torch that athletes today continue to carry. Does this necessarily make him the greatest player of all time? No. But when you think about what he was able to accomplish, I don't know how you could be anything but awestruck. What is greatness?
When I think about Bill Russell, the civil rights leader.
That's pretty awesome. Back then, like, it was just such a big, like, time in history, and it's just that's really cool knowing that he got involved in all that, and he became the first black coach for the Celtics. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, obviously Celtics fans get maligned by the NBA media for some miscreant fans that happen to take up some of the stands there. But it was impressive that, at least for a time, able to embrace Bill Russell as the superstar that he was, aside from, a few in that era that obviously made it difficult for him. And I'm just impressed that he was able to persevere and put on the effort that he did. I mean, to win 11 championships, while also in the heat of the civil rights movement, when you're not even allowed to sleep in the same hotel as your teammates.
Yeah.
That all is impressive, and I think adds to his accomplishments that much more. I mean, to think to not be able to sleep in a comfortable bed or eat a comfortable dinner, all while being 6'9", and obviously we compare that to today's athlete that needs to have luxury living, luxury hotel rooms. And this guy had to slum it because of some of the laws that were around in the era that he played.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's crazy, man. Like nowadays, if you're a basketball player, you just get hated because of stats, because people are jealous that you're not on their team. You know what I mean? But back then, it was like real hate.
Yeah. No, I mean, it sucks that you had to go through it, but I think it's because of people like Bill Russell why we're in a better place than we were in the 60s.
Exactly.
That we can have, obviously, an unsegregated game that we have today.
It's a question worth discussing, even if there are multiple answers with equal validity. One answer might be this, that greatness is the absence of potential. Bill Russell couldn't control how tall he was, or how much muscle mass his body could support, how fast he could run, how quickly he could jump. There are a host of things that might hinder or accentuate an individual's potential. Greatness is when, at the end of the road, you can look at that individual and say with certainty, there is no more potential. Every ounce got drained, every possibility exhausted. The tank got emptied, and the fight got fought. There was simply nothing left. That's a form of greatness worth celebrating. Bill Russell didn't dominate basketball. He conquered it. He ruled a sport for 13 years. Any uprisings or revolutions were succinctly quelled. There is perhaps no term more aptly suited for the totality of what he created than the word dynasty. He was the greatest defender basketball has ever seen. He steered basketball into the modern era. He created a culture from scratch. His loyalties did not belong to fans or the media or to Boston. His loyalty belonged to the Celtics. There is such a thing as a Platonic idea, named after the philosopher Plato. Take, for instance, a chair. You know what a chair is. You have in your mind the idea of a chair. They might look different, be made out of different material, and serve different purposes. But a chair is recognizable because you have the Platonic idea of a chair. You might have heard this term used to describe friendships. A platonic friendship is one centered around the very essence of friendship itself, not romance or sexual gratification or convenient utility, but simply because you enjoy being in that person's company. Bill Russell, more than anyone, unlocked the platonic idea of basketball. And I think in a big way, that's why we love sports. Sports is one of the most organic and compelling storytelling devices that we have ever.
Think this guy's on his soapbox a little bit?
A little bit, yeah. Yeah.
I get it. You gotta add some value to this video, kind of extend it
Got
out a little bit.
got
Nice little
gotta
video
keep
essay.
gotta keep us watching.
Gotta keep us watching.
Profound.
Gotta get more ad
Sports
revenue.
tell a story, and in that story, we hope to find pieces of ourselves. In the Platonic idea of basketball, we find things like compassion, selflessness, solidarity, resiliency, and triumph. There's one last thing that sums it all up: the 1969 finals. It's Russell's last year, and the Celtics are running on fumes. They finished the season 48-34, their worst record since they drafted him. Still, they roll through the East and find themselves matched up against the Lakers, with Elgin Baylor, Jerry West, and Wilt Chamberlain. The Celtics are massive underdogs. Finally, Russell's most bitter rivals will reach the top of the mountain and send him out a loser. But Boston won't go down without a fight. The series goes to 7 games. Every game but one is decided in the single digits. Russell's scoring days are over. These days, he leads his team by cleaning the boards and setting up his teammates. In Game 7, his swan song. In Los Angeles, Bill Russell and the Celtics did what they always did. They found a way, and they won. Here, after cementing himself as the greatest basketball player of all time, is the Platonic idea of basketball.
Yes, I'm here with Bill Russell. Bill, this must have been a great win for you. Exactly.
All right, C-Money, what do you think? Bill Russell, the GOAT?
That was a very, very, very good video, but I think right now LeBron is catching up to that.
Yeah, I agree. Not the GOAT, but certainly a much-needed figure in sports, set the groundwork for everything we have today in today's game, and obviously one that will be missed. Like I said, we're recording this in the same week that Bill Russell passed away. Bill, wishing for your family, your friends, everyone who's still around to celebrate your life. Obviously, like I mentioned, I'm a big-time Boston Celtics fan. Not the GOAT, but definitely an important player in NBA history. All right, leave a like on this video. Hit that subscribe button from Juju Talk Sports and C-Money. Stay safe, happy, and healthy, and we will see you next time.